So early ROI, this often gets expressed differently. What it often gets expressed as is I want to be able to do things faster. They will say things like, I think Jeff Sutherland wrote a book that was something like twice the work in half the time, right? That kind of a thing. So like 2x the work, 1/2 the time, right? And that's like valid, right? Because people are looking for efficiencies. They're looking for ways to get things into market faster. But, you know, we have the physics of project management, right? That's always kind of like looking us in the face, right? You have scope, you have time, and you have cost, right? So you kind of like pick two, and then you have to kind of float the third, or you have to figure out how to bring all of these different variables into balance. And so if you're going to say something like, I'm going to do 2x the scope, and I'm going to do it in half the time, like, is cost going to stay the same? Is cost going to go up? Like, I don't know, right? So like what I want to explore with you guys a little bit is what are our options around doing things faster, and what does it actually mean to do things faster or to get things into market faster? And the reason why I categorize it as early ROI is because what the executives want is they don't want to just deliver faster, right? It's not just about like lines of code as fast as you can deliver them, right? It's not even about working tested software as fast as you can deliver it. It's really about what is that combination of working tested software that we can put reliably in front of a customer so that we can start charging money for it, and we can start obviously getting revenue to fund further development, but we can also start to get that product in the hands of paying customers faster so that they can start to give us feedback around it. Okay. So a lot of it is how you might think about it is we need to start thinking about optionality to release. Okay. And so I think in options a lot, right? So I'm creating options to release things and to be able to get them into market faster so we can start charging money for them and we can start getting feedback. So like a lot of things, we're gonna build from kind of the atomics of this, and then we're gonna start talking about how do you like deal with it at scale and different things. So let's talk a little bit about what the system of delivery looks like that gives us that optionality to release, right? So I'm going to talk about the idea of the system of delivery, but then the other thing then we're going to have to figure out how to do is how do we educate the business to exploit that optionality to their economic advantage. Okay. And so it's a tension between kind of the system of delivery and the business's ability to exploit that. Okay, and we find that both of these can kind of become a problem. And like, let me give you a for example, like let's just at the simplest level, let's say we had a really well-functioning Agile team that knew how to operate off of a well-defined backlog that could produce a working tested increment of product at the end of the sprint, right? And life is good. But then we have the business that is approving big, giant projects that are long, cost a lot of money, and they aren't willing to do anything with it until the team is totally done. You kind of go like, well, how am I going to be faster? Like what things are going to contribute to being able to do that, right? So let's go back to the team's backlogs working tested software thing, right? So what gives me optionality to release at the team level is, again, things we've talked about, right? So there's not a whole lot new when you get under the mechanics of this thing, right? So I want a complete cross-functional team that owns its technology stack, that has very few dependencies, highly encapsulated has everything and everyone necessary to be able to deliver the product. And I want that team to be able to establish a stable velocity. I want a product ownership capability that enables me to break big things down into small things so that, I can pull a piece of the backlog off, feed it into the team, and then have the team on 2-week cycles be able to produce that piece of the software, right? So if I've got the size of the backlog, I got the velocity, then I can start to think about duration and scope, right? That's our basic law to me of team level agility. It's like the 3 things that have to be in place. And you notice that's like the anchor for almost everything that I like to talk about. So how does that get us into an early release situation? Well, you think about what has to happen for that, right? So the idea is mechanically, whatever I pull off the backlog has to be built and tested and accepted by the product owner. And then we talk about this idea of potentially shippable, right? In an ideal world, at a minimum of about every 2 weeks, I would like to be able to take this bit of backlog, run it through the team, deploy it into production, and to be able to actually put it into the product and have a real person pay me for it and use it. Okay. Sounds pretty simple. Okay. So again, mechanically, right? You think about, I've got to have these things broken up into small pieces. I have to have the team have some ownership. There can't be a whole bunch of external dependencies. I have to be able to continuously test the product. I have to be able to have some sort of maybe CI/CD pipeline here. I have to be able to push something into production really safely. I might have to be able to roll it back if there's a problem, right? So there's this whole execution pipeline that has to be in place in order to be able to give something actually to a client and to be able to use it, right? So that's kind of the mechanical side of early ROI, right? You have to have the ability to do that. But here's the other side of that. What goes into the backlog, right? What the product owner puts into that backlog, there has to be a hypothesis there about what a customer might actually use. Okay. And so what we want is we want stuff at the top of the backlog that there's some person out here that might actually find it useful and maybe even pay you money for it, right? That's the goal. So we can have the ability to deliver this way all day long, right? But if we're not feeding the backlog with the right stuff, then we don't have the opportunity to be able to get it in front of a customer and potentially charge for it, or to get feedback, or to learn, or to do any of the other things, right? So I'm sure you guys have heard of the idea of a minimally viable product. At this level, right? So we're just talking single team level, Scrum level execution, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Single backlog, right? All that kind of thing. So the idea is that I've got this, I have to understand what is the smallest thing that I think is valuable to put in front of a customer. I'll give you an example within Leading Agile, because I like to give Leading Agile examples. We're building internally, I have a small internal dev team, and we are building a product that we call ELM Cooperstown. Whole reason why we call it ELM Cooperstown, but it's Employee Lifecycle Management. And eventually, this is going to be an iPhone app that is going to be able to, we'll be able to pull up somebody in the database. I'll be able to see like their location. I'll be able to see their salary. I'll be able to see like who their pod leader is, what account they're on. We do a lot of personality profiling assessments in Leading Agile. So I've got like the ability to, see their personality profiles. Eventually I'll be able to see things like what learning LMS modules they've been through, what onboarding things they've been through, what core skills are. And then the holy grail, right? Somewhere down the road from now, we're going to have the ability to say, okay, we had this consultant that was operating in this way with this client. They were really successful. We've got a similar engagement. Okay, show me all the consultants that are available that profile like Melissa, or show me all the consultants that are based in Atlanta that profile like Tim, something like that, right? Because what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to really dynamically look up people, because we're getting pretty big now. We have over 100 consultants, right? I want to be able to look up people and understand kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. Okay, so the instruction that I gave to our lead software guy, a guy named Donald, is I said, really fast, I want the ability to show me an employee database, and I put some constraints on it. Because it's an iPhone app. I said, I want like some weird hacky iPhone app. Like I want it to be like a beautiful, can't spell beautiful, iOS app. Okay. And I want it to beautifully display a list of people. I want to be able to search, and I want to be able to have just on a name, and I want to be able to see some basic information. And I want to be able to see, there's one assessment we use called color code that I think is really super valuable. We could do a whole talk on that. That would actually be a pretty interesting talk. This whole thing called color code, I want to be able to see somebody's color code. So within like a matter of weeks, it wasn't like a super long time, I had this bit of stuff on my iPhone. And I am telling you, one of the most valuable things, right, I use on any given day. I use it probably 5 times a day because I'm constantly doing one-on-ones with people and talking to people, and we're making decisions about staffing and, you know, why maybe somebody's struggling here or not struggling there. We're not getting the performance we want or behavior we want or something like that. I use this thing 5 times a day, every single day, and it was delivered in something like 4 weeks, okay, in his spare time, right? Super, super valuable. Not nearly the vision that I anticipate having in this product a year from now, but what it does today, it does beautifully, and it does it with incredibly high quality, and it's super, super valuable, right? And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? So if I had this delivery capacity on my team and my organization that could, you know, dedicated team, dedicated technology, really clear backlog, the ability to produce a working tested software every sprint, like whatever. But I was sitting here as the product owner going, you know what, Donald, this is never, I don't want to release anything until we can get everything. Then I don't get anything actually early, and I don't get any value from it. So the tension on that dimension, kind of runs. The tension in that dimension is that the product people have to orchestrate and sequence the backlog in such a way that everything is like getting to like an MVP or incrementing the MVP. Okay. So you create the conditions for delivery, and then you have to teach the business how to exploit those conditions so that you can actually get the return. I imagine you guys see this quite a bit. It's like what starts to happen sometimes, and this is really the core of the Elevate Agile conversation that we're starting to have. We've really learned a lot trying to talk about this over the last year, is that there's a lot of people out there that have built these really sophisticated Agile delivery models. But the reality is that the business doesn't really know how to exploit it to get things in market early. So while we can do Agile, because we're still kind of dealing with project-based funding models, we're still dealing with large batches, annual cycles, right? All these different things. Nobody's thinking through, how do I decompose this work and put it in front of customers as fast as we possibly can? then this really great agile delivery capability that we've built goes really underutilized. So the promise of agile as a team level or even an enterprise class delivery model doesn't really realize the promise until the business understands how to exploit it. Okay. And so that example that I just gave you guys is like really simple, right? That's a single team, it's really actually non-revenue generating piece of technology, right? Very little pressure on that team to perform at any kind of rate. I'm the product owner. I'm the guy that's funding it, right? Really super simple. But because of that relationship between me and my expectations and that delivery capability we built, it's working really well. And every single time there's a release, every couple of days now, I get something new to play with that is like really cool. Other examples in market that I imagine being like this, when I talk to kids at university, I talk about Snapchat a lot because that's obviously one of the latest and greatest. If anybody, social platforms, or maybe that's even getting old news, or I guess TikTok or whatever's new. But I remember when Snapchat hit the scene, it was effectively just kind of like private video messaging that like just deleted a message like right away. As I recall, right? I was not an early adopter of Snapchat because at the time, as a parent, right, everybody was like, oh no, Snapchat, right? That's how kids are sending inappropriate pictures to each other, right? So where nobody gets busted, right? And when my first adult friend ever landed on Snapchat, I was like teasing her that she was Snapchatting her kids and how weird that was. But apparently by that time, Snapchat had actually evolved into had a more mature user base. But that's where it started. It was this little thread of functionality that was like, I'm going to send you a message or a picture and it's going to go away, right? As that product has evolved, right now it's got a more wide, more diverse user base. There's stories and all kinds of different things and filters and all kinds of fun stuff, right? That people are using. And, kind of a fun factor on that, my kids literally will not text me. Like they'll ignore my text, but they'll reply to a Snapchat, which I find incredibly annoying. But point being is that was like an example of like an MVP that got into market using agile delivery capabilities, and the business understood how to put something into that team really quickly to bring something in market and then grow it based upon user feedback, right? That is the absolute definition of early ROI. Okay. So now let's scale that concept, right? So now let's look into like a multi-tiered kind of enterprise agile kind of thing. Let's talk about like how that's working. Right. So now we probably have like shared services teams, right? Service 1, service 2, service 3, service 4. We might have, product teams or feature teams. That might be a better way of saying it, like feature teams, right? That kind of a thing, right? And then we have some sort of program layer. Right? If we're thinking safe, we're doing like release trains, we're doing PI planning, right? All that kind of a thing. That's probably subordinate to some sort of portfolio layer. Okay. Now, the trick when you start to get to this level of scale, right? And there's kind of typically two ways that you can manage this. I tend to like to model this as a Kanban-based queue up here. You could also manage it as in more like a kind of a release planning, kind of PI planning kind of model, right? If you prefer safe, right? What have you, right? So I tend to like flow-based, batch and queue, fine, right? Whatever. But the trick is when you start to scale this kind of stuff, let's say you want to have a 12-week release. Okay. The trick is that you have to sequence the features that go into this release in such a way that enough of the user stories at the team level and at the feature level, product level, right, get done such that at the end of the 12-week release, you have something to actually put into market, right? And then kind of like all this kind of the same rules apply, right? Apply. What is the smallest set of features that is going to add value? How are those features going to get decomposed into team level backlogs, right? How are those backlogs going to get rolled up into the program level? How are the features that the user stories roll up into, how are they going to get validated? How are they going to get tested? How are they going to get deployed? How are they going to be put into market? How are they going to be rolled back if there's like a crisis or a problem, right? That whole chain, that whole release management chain has to be like leaned out and tightened up so that you can put these bigger things into market, right? What often is necessary there is you need a portfolio level that is dealing with projects that are way smaller investments than how we're thinking about it now, right? So I told an executive of a company we probably did like a year 2, year 3 transformation for, you'd be halfway there if you would just never approve a project that was greater than 3 months, right? It's all about smaller bets. David Spann introduced that language to me at one point in time, right? If we could get the organization to not put anything, not 30 months, take that out, 3 months, right? So if we could get the organization not to put anything into the system that was greater than 3 months, and everything that we put into the system broke down into features that were maybe a week or 2 big, that broke down into user stories that were a few days, and we could sequence all of this work here in such a way that it rolled up and flowed through the program tier, the product tier. And then as features got done, we were actually able to release projects into market every couple of months, right? Then we have the ability to now these big top level things that have big level ROI, right? Now we can start to have that kind of a conversation around how this works. Okay, so you start to think about, so we've got the delivery capacity here at the team level execution, teams, backlogs, working, tested software, making sure that we're running the smallest set of stuff through, getting it to a really clear definition of done, working, tested software, everything's potentially shippable, everything's deployable. These things roll up into larger increments that we're maybe continuously releasing or maybe batch and queuing, right? But they have a testing and integration cycle that's fast and continuous. And then the organization has the ability to release things in market in a more fast and continuous way.